Alrighty. So we are back after some technical difficulties. No worries. These things happen, right? So I think we were talking about just how on the front end, people assume for performance, all we have to do is, like you were saying, just address the mechanics. And you don't even really have to worry about everything on the back end. That's like, okay, now that you're improving force production, now that you're improving these efficiencies with movement patterns, you also then have to address this increase in acceleration or increase in force. Like you have to be able to channel, or sorry, you have to be able to absorb that force, right? So you don't throw yourself into some crazy position and then, end up dead like Francis, or whatever the case may be. Like,
hey, yeah. we have not verified that Francis is dead.
Potentially, allegedly,
highly likely.
Yes. So, what other factors stand out to you as the most important, especially for, like, let's say a high school athlete? When it comes to assessment, like, why is it important for everyone to get an assessment preseason, or why are assessments important in general for anybody, right? Like, so I use this kind of explanation or metaphor quite a bit when it comes to kind of pitching the idea of why everyone needs assessments, right? So every single youth athlete has to get a physical before they start a sport, right? So when I was in high school, at the very end of summer, before we could start preseason training for cross country, we had to get a physical. It's like everybody has to. But that physical, was that actually going to tell me whether I was predisposed to rolling my ankle? Or was that physical going to tell me, you know what, you might get shin splints this season? Or was it going to tell me, hey, you're going to get a straight up stress fracture? Like, it wasn't going to do that. That's not the job of the physical. But I think oftentimes the idea is, oh, well, if you pass the physical, then you're probably going to be fine. Like, if you were going to get hurt, and if it was at all predictable, they would have found it with the physical. But, like, that's not the job of the physical. So can you talk a little bit about why it's important to get these kinetic assessments?
Yeah, it's important to limit your exposure to black people being on your show. Because they don't have their equipment and their crap together, right? So I knew we were why are you turning red, bro? I knew
it's the lighting. It's the lighting.
Yeah. I knew prior to you were going to have me discussing something. I leave my computer on 50% and think that's right. This guy, and guys like this guy don't even be prepared.
Shoot, I'm plugged in. I'm 100% right now. So.
Yeah, that's what white people do. That they be plugged in. So, no, you're right. I mean, I struggle with that a lot. I feel like that's one of the many factors. I won't blame it just on physicals, but it's one of the many factors why we're so behind in the U.S. as far as the kinetics race or measuring and analyzing our athletes, because of the fact that there is no way possible that a physical that's pathology based is going to focus on what kinetics. I mean, you're asking a doctor to or a PA to assess kinetics, and that's not the first primary thing. It's not even set up for that. It's not that they can't. It's just the fact that is not the most thing that takes precedence. It's not the priority of what they're trying to do. From a cardiovascular standpoint, they're just trying to make sure there are no complications that would prevent you from being able to play sports, right? Now you start to transition and talk about the forces and the dynamics of that, then yeah, it becomes very complicated, in that situation. But so I think that, you know, I realize that good intentions don't always have good outcomes. And
Mm-hmm.
really, when it comes to kinetics, like I talked about earlier, is that the bottom line when it comes to kinetics is far more complicated than we know. And so your structure and how it's configured dictates how it can perform. And so you have to get that, evaluated and assessed to determine, what you're predisposed to. And the thing about it is here's how I look at it. So when we think about this, a lot of times parents, well, I'm gonna just go ahead and talk real with you for a second. Real with you for a
You,
second.
you, ha-
Uh,
you haven't been real so far, so now's a good
exactly.
time to start, coach.
Now's a good time. Okay, thank you. So, parents seem to think that participation um, ranks higher on the hierarchy, right? And it does not. So typically, what happens is I get so many parents that come in and bring their athletes in, and they're injured, and they're sitting there on my table, and they're like, "Well, what happened? I don't understand
Mm-hmm.
why she got injured.
Mm-hmm.
She's fit. She works out all the time. She's
Mm-hmm.
competing year round."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, like, listen, I just straight up tell them because I don't pull any punches. And 90% of the time, parents really value my upfront honesty. And I just tell them, hey, things that move malfunction. You got to understand,
Mm-hmm.
uh, if your child first name isn't Jesus, right? And I'm not talking about Jesus, right? But if your child's first name isn't Jesus, then their kinetics is not 100%. So you
Yeah.
you have to understand that just because they're performing, they are not 100%. Everything is not flawless. And I think that's the misconception because we're so, in tune with this concept of, hey, I go in and see a surgeon or see a coach when something doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And that is highly assumptive. And so when we have that assumption, then we start to have these erroneous thought processes. So what I look at is this: athletes on a minimal basis should be have their kinetics measured once a year. If you're a highly competitive athlete, you need to have your kinetics measured twice a year. So the
Mm-hmm.
way I envision it to be is, you need to have them. The first time you need to have them measured is at the fall, so beginning of 2-a-days, whether that's for volleyball, cross country, football, or just at the fall if they're not playing any of those sports. And then the second time that they need to be evaluated is in, spring. So they're coming out of a full season of sports, and they're going to have kinetic baggages with them because they're going to get nicked, dinged, and banged up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they still, because like I talked about before, from a survival standpoint, most athletes are used to playing through issues. They're
Mm-hmm.
used to having nagging issues, and like, man, they get up in the morning, it doesn't feel right, but they keep on going. A
Yep.
lot of times, some athletes have, high pain threshold, and so, that damn thing needs to be dragging and almost falling off before they even start to complain about symptoms,
Yep.
right? So especially if they're a very driven athlete, and so, I mean, so we need to stop making these assumptions, and we need to rely on data to, help us, make more informed decisions about our athletes. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we need to do with that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a very effective tool to help us, with that. And so, athletes also, one of the things I see with parents with athletes is they're saying, "Hey, I want to keep them very busy, and so in the summertime, this is when we're going to have a lot of travel ball. This is when we're going to do a lot of camps and clinics and showcase our athletes." But what I want to ask parents is, what are you showcasing? What type
Mm-hmm.
of product are you showing up with and presenting and saying, "Hey, give this kid right here $80,000 scholarship."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the kid is limping. The kid is not
Banged
able.
up,
Yeah, they're banged up. They don't have
poor diet, no rest, no sleep. Mm-hmm.
exactly
Mm-hmm.
right. And so you assume that everything is well. when it isn't, it's never okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where athletes don't ever reach their potential, is because they're not doing things that are specific enough for them. And so how we know this to be true is, when I consult for Texas A&M University at Commerce, you know, 90% of those athletes that I work with at the collegiate level say their injuries started with their kinetic chain. Those injuries started in junior high to their freshman year in high school.
Wow. And they've just been
And
right
they just
behind them the entire way. They've never
yeah.
dropped them.
So
Hmm.
think about the potential and the performance that's left on the table that they're not even utilizing.
Yep.
Right?
Wow.
Again, your kinetic chain, it is very rare that it's going to stop you from doing anything. What it's going to do is it's just going to lock you out of the higher level force and velocity parameters, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to keep you in a moderate level. So those
Mm-hmm.
athletes are still receiving scholarships. They're still, competing at a moderate to high level, but
Mm-hmm.
they know they have more in them. And then
Yeah.
it's not until the collegiate level that they figure out, like, man, something just this got to be different.
Yeah. They're taking the elevator up, but they haven't reached the penthouse.
Have not. I'm all the
Mm.
way up. They don't really get there. They
They're not,
really don't get a chance to
they're
get
not
there.
saying that.
But they're headed there, but they don't
They're
get
trying
there.
to get there.
Yeah. And
But
then you look at it, we have quite a few issues, right? Like, so again, this doesn't fall at the feet of any one profession. So when I say this, right, don't get all sideways on me and get all sensitive, right? Just it is it here's the issue, is that we're all of us are failing, our entire profession, and sports med, everybody involved in sports med and performance coaching, we're failing because of the fact that, we're not really identifying athletes issues enough. And typically what happens is you have uh, most of the little league, so a lot of these issues start because the kid, there's let me just explain it this way. So today, athletes are starting from age 4, 5, and 6. They're starting travel ball at that early age. And so during this time frame when they should be learning the basics, they don't really have refined neurological systems. That is the prime time that we supposed to um, inundate their little neurological systems with the most variety of activity and movement strategies. Okay.
mm-hmm.
Not so that it is specific, just so we can just start adding things to their database, their athletic database,
Mm-hmm.
to improve kinetics later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't get that. What they do in little leagues is you have coaches that are maybe dads, some are not dads, but they're all trying to be Nick Sabans and build, these prime time athletes, right, that are in little league.
Mm-hmm.
And really what they're supposed to do is introduce the basics. So they don't do basic stuff. What they do is they go to their favorite university coach, right, look what they're doing, and then they bring it back to these little league kids and they try to look good in front of these parents and do all these high level type drills. Okay.
Yep.
And they want to win. I'm all about competitiveness, right? I'm all about winning, but also I'm about winning. And so winning at that scenario is not necessarily about the X's and O's and the outcomes of the games, but doing what it takes at that moment, which is to develop neurological systems and introduce movement patterns. So the more variety we can give them, the more plasticity they end up with. And then
Mm-hmm.
they come to, say, fifth, sixth, seventh grade, they need to be introduced to formal training. And now, to be honest with you, we need to start formal training starting around 7 to 8 and 9, because athletes are starting sooner. And
Mm-hmm.
so injuries are starting sooner as well, right? So
Mm-hmm.
uh, just because they're exposed. And anytime you have force and momentum involved, it doesn't matter what the kid is doing. Injury is a threat. It is there. It is present.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and so, but since we don't get, that neurological priming, if you will, at the little league level, what happened is we get kids that are, in seventh and eighth grade that don't even know how to move, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're unable to skip, they're unable to shuffle, toes turned out, unable to do a level change where they take their hips and lower their hips, and then they don't know the, like, hey, basic physics. If I'm trying to move left, my right leg is responsible for generating force and
Mm-hmm.
driving me to my left to do a
Yep.
shuffle.
Yeah.
Those are just simple examples, but they haven't been formally taught how to run because we're still under this perception that athletes are born. No shit, they're born, right? Every human is born with that logic, right? Like, okay, so that doesn't hold much water. Okay. So what they're trying to compare is they're a little athlete with a genetic freak. We ain't talking about no genetic freak, baby. You probably don't have one of those. Okay. And if you do, kudos to you. But
Mm-hmm.
ideally, the rest of us normal humans, right? We don't have genetic freaks. So yeah, athletes are not born, they're built, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
start this through kinetic measurement. We say, hey, where is their current level? Where's the structure? Where are the positives and strengths and what are the shortnesses and weaknesses? And then we say, okay, let's create a roadmap, right? Because no kid has a roadmap. First of all, kinetics is not exact. So what we have to do is we have to establish a roadmap. And then this is what data collection will help us do when we analyze them and measure them. And so we can see here are the positives and the negatives with their structure, their kinetic chain. And then from there, we can start to say, okay, here are some primary things, here's some intermediate things, and here's some low level things. Here's some threats, here's some things we want to watch and monitor. And then here are the things that we want them to train with now. So you don't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
have to train with me specifically, right? See, that's another thing too, is like I think that, parents are saying, well, it's insane. It's insane. So I'm kind of working on this project, right? And I'm gonna try to dwindle it down to 9 to start out with. 9 dumb things smart parents think about their athletes. That's what I want to try
Mm-hmm.
to think about this project. But anyway, so what parents typically think, and one of the excuses I commonly hear for years, not just this year, but for years, oh, we don't have enough time to train. We would like to do some training, or we would like to do some things with their kinetics if they know a little bit about it, but we don't have time. And
Mm-hmm.
now, to their this is true. They don't because they're again participation is ranks high,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hey,
Because they're doing all those showcases, because they're traveling for summer ball. Cause yeah, they don't have time.
yeah, athletes' schedules dominate the household
Yeah.
in 2019. Has been for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they literally don't have time, right? But then that's not excuse enough. So the ideal thing that I would love for parents to start to begin to do is saying, hey, listen, well, let's at least get a baseline kinetic measurement and analysis. And so we can start to propagate some information to see what is it that I need, because then you do have time. It's just how you're going to manage it. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that you think is ranks higher probably does not, and you need to be doing something else. But without the data to support it, you won't know what that is,
Mm-hmm.
because you're thinking like, well, hey, little Sally over here and Jimmy, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And because we are involved with this family and this community, we need to be doing the same thing. And that just
Mm-hmm.
isn't the case, right? You
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing what your athlete needs and what their kinetic needs are, and not based off what everybody else is doing. But that's a very hard thing, because the other issue or factor that is weaved in there that most people don't talk about is that it becomes social for the parents,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right?
Oh yeah.
Hey,
The whole thing becomes political real quick. Like,
it really
why is
does.
she getting playing time, or why is he getting playing time? They didn't show up to this one session where we were focusing on this specific thing. Well, yeah, that's because they're okay at that, and they need to be doing this other thing that they're not good at. And now they're a much more rounded athlete, which means they're going to get more playing time. So,
Correct. You're absolutely right. And so that's one of the topics that I want to address, is unhealthy comparisons for
mm,
athletes, right? So
mm-hmm,
it really is what, you know, at the bottom line, it takes what it takes. So what one athlete needs is not what the opposite athlete need or your athlete may need. And there's a better way of saying it, but basically that's what it comes down to is you need, again, if you do the basics, then you can expect the basics, and that may or may not help your athlete. And really the good intentions, you're saying, well, we're traveling, we're showing them off and getting them exposure, and we're sending them to camps and clinics, but you might need to save that money and not travel with them, and then actually keep them in a year or 2 summers in a specialized training based on their kinetic needs. And so that's
Right.
a very difficult thing to do because, that's not sexy, right? It's sexy to
Exactly.
say, well, hey, listen, we're going to, Florida and we're taking little Jimmy and he's here and he's at University of, Miami and he's da 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 and we're all here in the group and, it's happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing sexy about saying, hey, let's work on these little detail things that your kid needs. You
Yep.
can't post that, right? Like you can't talk to people about how cool and amazing that is, and
Right.
when it's really highly important.
That's the truth.
Yeah, but then the flip side of that coin, right, is when you have to pay for a $17,000 ACL and meniscus
Mm-hmm.
issue, right, or a stress fracture of some kind, you're like, oh my gosh, I would have done anything had I known, right? But no shit, you sure would have, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Shoulda,
anybody
woulda,
would have.
coulda.
Yeah, right. But again, so this is one of the things that we are not doing our job by promoting, what's available for athletes and what parents should be thinking about their athletes and what coaches should be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
and while we're on the subject, right? Shit, let me jump on coaches' asses too, right? Because like, look, here's the thing that we have. Coaches want to create this tyrannical situation to where like, hey, listen, we're giving athletes everything they need.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put our strength and conditioning and summer workouts against everybody else's. Or
Yep.
those guys over there just want your money and they're not really helping kids. Yeah. How the fuck do you know first? Second of all, do you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And the
Oh
third
yeah.
of all, are you assessing athletes individually and are you focused on X's and O's and putting grades in the goddamn grade book, right? Like
Yep.
so what that's just not a sophisticated thing to do. If we're all on the same team, we want to help improve the athlete. We want to help do what's best for the athlete, and you want to help build successful programs for your school. So instead of looking at differences, how about you start to think, right, for a second, hey, how can I find someone who is competent? Because the reality of it is all of us out here are not very competent,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how can I find someone who is competent and how I can start to evaluate with my athletes and say, hey, listen, you know what? We have to build our program here in a strength and conditioning perspective at school, right? We have to have it here. I
Mm-hmm.
can't provide everything that every athlete needs and your athlete needs specifically. I have to do what's best for the overall group. Some will succeed, some won't succeed,
Mm-hmm.
and really we need them to do what's best for them individually. Some can't afford that. We understand that. So we're not really talking about them. Hey, I would love to see little Jimmy have better footwork. We do these drills. He's just not picking it up. Hey, can you find someone or can you go and see this group over here and take little Jimmy because little Jimmy will benefit for this. I will be able to get him in and contribute more to the team. But and it's a lot of pressure on them, right? So I just put them on blast, but I'm gonna get them off the hook too because it's a lot of pressure for them, right? To set up one system that they won't be consistent with to begin with,
Right.
and that is it's again we are highly assumptive that most school programs are competent at what they're able to do. They don't have the schedule. They're rushed. It's just so many. It's basically. Whew, it is a tough situation for that situation to be successful. And see, and here's what we know is so we have this whole egotistical thing. So we look at the fact that like coaches in the school feel like, hey, coaches at school feel like they're professional coaches because they get paid to do it. And then
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying is that coaches that have training facilities are somehow not professional because they don't get paid to do it for some reason. But yet, we get paid just like you guys get paid. And it just doesn't really make sense. It's not a sophisticated way of thinking about it. So
Yeah.
what they're trying to say is that what they don't like is the fact that parents are taking their athletes to club scenarios where club coaches are teaching them higher level instruction based technique and tools and tactics and mechanics. And so parents feel like, hey, well, my kid is not getting everything that they need from the sport program at the school. And then the
Mm-hmm.
coaches get offended by that are
Right.
at the school. And they're
Yep.
saying, well, we are degree professionals. And what they're looking at is the small area of guys that don't have a degree. They may work for, Verizon stringing pipe through sewers or something in the day, and then they come home at night and teaching athletes how to swing a bat. Now that guy may be highly competent at that
Mm-hmm.
situation, and then so what happens is he teaches the kid, get the kid performing, better, and then they go back to school, and then the school coach says, "Hey man, you need to come through with your hips," and then the kid pops off and says, "Well, my hitting coach told me to do it this way,"
Mm-hmm.
and really it's that scenario that they don't like. So
Yep.
then they lump everyone else into this category that's outside of a school district and say,
Uh-huh.
those guys don't know what they're doing. We're the only ones that know what we're doing.
Yeah,
That's a
we're the authority here.
bad.
Just
That's
yeah.
right. Come on, man. Let's do really. But
Yeah.
that's what they think. And so we got to start to drop that ego. And, again, there are levels to coaching. There are
Mm-hmm.
some guys that are really highly competent. And I'll be honest with you, a degree doesn't not make you a competent coach. It does not make you a professional. I will attest to that in court, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
fact,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But we try to hide behind those things a lot, right? And we need to stop that. We need to just start to get to know other people and know their philosophies and not check our ego at the door and say, hey man, listen, here's where my program is strong. Here's where my program, do a measurement and assessment on your program if you're a
Mm-hmm.
coach, right? And say, hey, listen, I realize I'm not trying to do everything. I can't provide everything. I don't want to provide everything. You don't have the time, the skills, and the resources to do it. And there's levels to coaching for all of us. And just
Mm-hmm.
like for me, there are things I'm really effective and competent at, and there's things that I'm highly ineffective in. And so I'm aware of that. So I connect myself with professionals who are competent at the things I'm not competent at. And
Yep.
again, that's how you build, the best scenario for the athlete. And, you're not basing it off, your gut feeling. You're basing it off data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a more sophisticated way for us to do. And I think overall, as our society continues to propagate and live on in a duration and spectrum of time, we are supposed to do better. We're expected to do it, and we evolve. And we're supposed to evolve, and that means we're supposed to get smarter and sophisticated, more sophisticated with how we do things. And if
Mm-hmm.
we understand that we're limited by what we know and what we don't know, and the known things create biases, and the unknown things create, you know, um, these blind spots, then we will become more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
I think so. I think it does. Um, so can you briefly go over um, like what is a sample kinetic assessment for, let's say, a um, we got fall sports, you know, upcoming. So pick an athlete from a fall sport that they're going to be doing some preseason training over the summer. What's a sample kinetic assessment that you would go through? And you don't have to, detail everything, but just so somebody who's not familiar with that at all, so they kind of have some idea of what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we want to do is just from a basic standpoint, look at their posture. Posture is the foundation. Kinetic posture, right, is the foundation to all kinetic movement. So, like, what your kinetic system is supposed to be able to do is produce force, reduce force, dynamically stabilize force, and three planes of motion. That means so you can go forward, backwards, laterally, and then create some type of rotational um, component to your movements. So before it can do all of those things, you have to look and see what your posture. So when you're looking at your athlete, you're looking at them from the ground up. You're looking at what their feet are doing, the position of the feet. And so talking about excavating, and digging down deeper, basically what I looked at was it took me 14 years to figure this out, right? Thank God. I mean, it's just about getting there. It's not about, you know, learn it
How long
fast.
it takes.
Yeah, exactly. But it took me 4 years, 14 years to figure this out. So basically, when we look at things, there are four primary pelvofemoral deviations that we're going to see, and it doesn't matter what the actual injury is, right? Like it's going to start or manifest from one of these four. It has been consistent over the past 14 years. So that basically is if we have a pelvofemoral adduction, that's where the knee collapses and go in, right? That's where the thigh moves inside of what the hip. So if the hip is here, instead of the knee being here, right up underneath it, it basically moves inside. So you'll have this misalignment, this adduction pattern, which is probably the most common issue that we'll have. And then you have where the pelvis, what we call a pelvofemoral approximation, which that basically says that you have your hips and your pelvis. Okay, this is your center of mass. Then you have your legs, so from hip, knee, foot, and ankle. And basically, what happens is your pelvis and your center of mass shifts outside of your foot, what we call your base of support. And then outside of that, we have what we commonly call a Trendelenburg, which simply means your pelvis will drop lower than horizontal on the contralateral side, or it can lift up higher than contralateral side, which simply means the same thing, but it has a different implication. So those are going to be your four basic things, and they lead, and it's pretty amazing. And I was able to figure out that it leads to all your 12 basic, injuries that you're going to have, from plantar fasciitis to Achilles tendonitis, shin splints, IT band, runner's knee or anterior knee pain, ACL to meniscus tear, groin, hip, low back sciatic, SI joint, low back pain. So it'll hit all of those areas. And so typically what happens is, which is pretty amazing to me. So we in the sports med field and performance field, one of the reasons why I say we're failing is because we will fixate so much on the symptom that has manifested and not really the kinetic foundation from which it started from. It originated from this, and then it came out and it caused this breakdown. So if you just focus on, well, for a plantar fasciitis, we like to do this, then you're not fixing the problem, right? Because then what will happen is it could leave the spot that is the force, higher forces, higher, strain is going to that area. It's been driven to that area because of one of those four deviations. So we don't fix the deviation. We just focus on the symptoms. It rarely cleans itself up.
Yeah,
right?
that issue's gonna come back.
Yeah,
It's just
so
a
you
matter of
have to
time.
start on cleaning up the structure. That's why, and that's a postural deviation. So we can look at that, and that's what we're looking for. And then, as it moves down the chain, which obviously we're talking about the starting at the ground, we look at overpronation. That's just a fancy name for looking at, what position is the foot and the arch and the ankle. So we have what we call OPS1, OPS2, OPS3. So we classify that based on OPS1 is you have a flat arch. Okay, that means the vault, the arch itself. If you look at your kid's foot structure, it's supposed to have a curve or a vault, right? It's supposed to have some kind of arch. And if that arch is not there, that creates huge issues on how they can absorb force, dissipate force, distribute force, and dissipate force. If that foot is flat, then what's going to happen, instead of them absorbing force and then distributing it across all the multiple joints and muscle tissues, what they're going to do is they're not going to distribute it. It's going to go in one direction. And then that area, that direction that it goes, is going to create a breakdown, failure, and that creates some type of injury. So basically, they're going to have a movement error, so they're not going to move as efficiently as they should because their alignment and structure is off. And then that's going to create a strength imbalance, so they're not going to be able to put as much force or use the right amount of force at the right time to decelerate momentum. And then that's going to produce that tissue overload and eventually an injury. And so that's why posture is so important. So anyway, that's OPS1. OPS2 is when the arch is there, but the ankle collapses and falls inside medially. And OPS3 is when you have a combination of a flat arch, a fallen arch, or flat arch, the medial ankle going in. And that is a very, very difficult situation. And so that creates, problems up the chain. So it'll go up into that pelvofemoral issue. And then you can have stress fractures in the more severe issues. But most often you're going to have some micro, right, level injuries, and so
Hmm.
that's where, if it's in the micro level stage, then it doesn't stop kinetic production. It just lowers the kinetic production down. So
Hmm.
you don't have full command of how your kinetic move and how you're able to absorb forces and exert force into the ground.
Gotcha. So
So
your body essentially is like, okay, this is not a great way to move. So to prevent anything drastic from happening, let's just reduce the total ability for these joint structures to, or the muscles involved with movement, the nervous system. Let's just put, like, it's like putting a governor on your car, right? So
absolutely,
if the body recognizes, like, okay, there's some potential for damage here, let's make it so that we can't go up to 90 miles per hour. Let's keep it at like
that's
50 and
brilliant.
below.
Right. That's
Gotcha.
exactly it. So you can change the mechanics all you want, and that's the thing. Is like, so if you having them swinging a bat, if we go back to that example, they'll look really proficient on the tee. Okay, they'll look really proficient at in the cage because you're slowing down the environment, you're slowing down the intensity and the pressure. And the
Mm-hmm.
moment that athlete leaves the cage and go out into the field where all those elements are very chaotic and they're normal,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to go back to a lower level, even though you just saw them highly proficient.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The demands were different, and so yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha. Well, if anybody just heard that and decides that they don't need a kinetic assessment, then I don't know what to tell you. You're on your own, right? So it's so important for, really, for everyone, whether you're injured or not. Like if you think that you're in the best shape, condition, strength level of your life, that doesn't mean that something isn't right around the corner. And that's something that you, uh, Ambrose, can more than likely, 9 times out of 10, see, you know what, this could be an issue. Hey, you feeling some stress or strain during these types of movements? Oh yeah, I noticed that, but it was just a little bit, so I didn't really think it was that big a deal. Like, oh
Absolutely.
man, I thought I thought I was pretty mobile in this area. Maybe I'm not. Oh, I thought I had really good balance. Actually, I can barely stand on one leg. Like, so,
Right.
it just shows, like, um, it's like people wait until something bad happens before they address it, and it's like, yeah, well, yeah, most people, that's just the way they're going to do it. But if you're really focused on improving your performance, but more importantly, being able to do these, play these sports, or just be active 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, if you still want to be moving, then figuring out how efficient you are at movement right now is super important. So, um, yeah, yeah. Along those lines, let's see where we're at here. Okay, so what's something that you're either reading right now or something that you're spending time learning right now?
Um, yeah. So, all right. So I have a couple things. So I'm reading about currently 7 books at the same time,
Why not?
and
One for each day.
well, I wish it was like that. That's a great idea. I need to try that at some point. So I so I talking about getting into the crane, right? And doing some difficult things. So I had been talking about for years, hey, I need to, and I generally, before 2019, I would read one book a year roughly, but I would just consume that entire book. And usually it was a training book. Every once in a while, I'll deviate from that. And then I just really felt like, man, this is A, too slow, and B, I need to be a little bit more broad, right? I need to be able to excavate, a little bit deeper, and so anyway, that was a little too slow. So there are books that I've been needing to read for a long time, and so anyway, so January, which it had nothing to do with a resolution, by the way. Okay, it was just, hey, it was just the right time for me, right? Um, but because I don't like, really New Year's resolutions and crap like that. But anyway, so I made a book list, and I originally was thinking of 5 books, and end up this list becoming, 29, 30 books or something like that. So I was like, oh, right, okay, cool.
That's almost 5.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so what I decided to do was like, okay, cool. I will buy 3 books a month, and I'll kind of get all those books laid out, by the end of the year. And so anyway, so I've been doing that, and it's been pretty good. So and then there's some books that I already had that I just haven't read yet, because I would do that too. Like if I saw something, for me, education, I'm very pro academics, right? And so I will invest in learning all the time. I will
Mm.
buy a book. I don't care if that book is $200. Like I'll buy that book, because for me, I know eventually, I'll make 20,000 off that book at some point. Over the
Hmm.
lifetime of that book. And the other thing is, I don't have to read a book from cover to cover, right? Because there's no one author that I'm gonna agree with 100% anyway. So like I use books as tools, and so I want to learn, I want to use something within that book to fill in the gap that I have. And so
Hmm.
anyway, so it's very rare that I will actually read a book from cover to cover unless it's just a really good book. So I have about 7 going right now. That I can do. Some books are 5 minutes, 15. I'm reading average probably about 5 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on my mood, depending on how much freedom I have. But I have just training that's my everything. So I have um, Think Like a Winner, Think Like a Warrior. That's the one that I really like. I'm reading a marriage book right now, Kiss Brain, Her Brain. And also I pull on book too, because we need to have that book. That's really a good relationship book. I actually might buy that for you too. So, and then I'm
Oh,
reading,
I think
huh?
I think the screen froze here. 1 second.
And I'm reading The Master and His Emissary.
Mm.
That's Ian with Joe Christ. I got that from actually Jordan Peterson.
Hmm.
That's a really good podcast if you haven't listened to. I'm sure you have, but anyway, so Ian, what he was talking about, the left hemisphere versus the right hemisphere and what their functions are, and it's really an intelligent and sophisticated book, and so I love that one a lot. I typically spend more time reading that. I am a slow reader. I told you I'm really not that smart, and I'm haven't diagnosed I've diagnosed myself, but I haven't formally been diagnosed and won't ever do it. But I'm probably pretty sure I'm dyslexic. So I have to read at a slow rate and 2 to 3 times or whatever. So, and then I'm reading The Pelvic Girdle by Diane Lee. She's a Canadian physiotherapist, and I think she's really phenomenal. She has a really good grasp on the pelvic girdle. One of the things that I'm really challenging myself on is I'm spending a lot of time on the glute med, glute max, and just the lumbopelvic and hip complex, because I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of our issues when it comes to kinetics originate from the pelvis. So the
Hmm.
pelvic and lumbopelvic hip complex, that area is really intriguing to me right now. Bridging the Gap from Rehab to Performance is another book. Sue Falsone, I think is I'm pronouncing her name right. Don't quote me on that. She was one of the main PTs that was back when Athletes Performance was first starting up, and she's a very brilliant PT. I like her work. She's really, really cool. And then the last book that I'm reading is The Go Giver, which is my buddy Joe. Uh, Joe put me onto this one, but it's about, he's a big sales guy, and he can sell you anything, right? But he sells racks, big storage racks, like to Amazon and to any warehouse facility. But He's a really good, he's a very good guy. And I'm probably, you know what, I'll probably have him on to do a podcast or whatever because the guy's just brilliant. But he's hardcore, man. He'll tell you how things broke down, and he just has he's from New York, so he has a best, excuse me, not New York, Chicago, and he just has a very unique way of relating to people
Mm.
and cutting through bullshit and telling you how to make decisions, how to solve problems, and he's just a phenomenal guy, man. But real funny, smart, creative, and he's just very direct. But he actually sent that book to me. He was like, "Man, look, you need this book. It's called Goal Giver. It's about being a good, it's about you're all about profits and not about adding to some value to someone's life. Then you don't need to be in the people service business." And so
Mm.
it's a very phenomenal book, and I love that book, and so it's pretty cool. So
Awesome.
I guess that's how I'm answering your question, but that's what I'm into right now.
So you're learning a lot, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I want to get into crane, man. I want to do some
Yeah.
heavy lift. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Yeah. You're not gonna learn if you're not reading a lot. So or asking a lot of questions or whatever the case may be. Um so is there like one piece of advice or a quote that really speaks to you, or like any piece of information that um that anybody listening, including me, if you got something to say to me, now's the time. So, anything that you want to share with anybody who's listening?
Yeah, that man, that's a very hard one. I can think about three, maybe four on the top of my head, but I'll just end it with one. But um, learn everything you can, and tell all you know. And so when you reverse engineer that, the simplest way of explaining that is when you reverse engineer that, if you are learning, if you feel like you're telling all that you know, then you're not learning enough. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's just the easiest way to say it. And so I again, on a surface level, it's like, hey, you're just trying to hide things. You're not going to fully give and invest in other people. No, 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 no. You're missing what I'm saying. That is a growth. That's a mandate for growth, right? It's saying, hey, listen, you should be interested in learning everything you can. You should be interested in telling everything that you know, but in the process, you should never run out of things to tell or things that you know, so you can continue to tell those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just a beautiful picture of that's probably the one that really resonates with me the most that I learned after working with Dr. Miller. It's kind of one of those things I learned. One of the many things that I learned.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's probably a good place to come to a close for now. So before we finish up, can you let everybody know um, how to find you either on all the social media, like if they wanna set up an assessment with you, if a parent wants to set up their kid to get an assessment, how do they follow you? How do they find you? How do they contact you? Um, yeah, plug yourself in any and every way right now.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, the easiest thing to do is to go see ambrose.com, and you'll find out all the ways to plug in and get connected with me. That's GOSEE, Ambrose, AMBROSE.com. And that has all my social media outlets, podcasts, articles, how to get in, call me, email me. And I mean, shit, you can text me, call me, whatever. It's 214-293-9235, right? And I think for me, man, I just don't want to play the game of trying to be a oil salesman. It's just like, listen, you want this shit or you don't want it, right? Like, I'm here
Mm-hmm.
to really help. I don't care who you are. You can be a coach, you can be a surgeon, whoever you are, right? Like, I literally want to help, and I want to be connected with people who are passionate about helping athletes, student athletes, and I mean, really, it doesn't really matter, what the You know, if you're an adult and you're an endurance athlete, obviously in 2005 I started with the endurance community, and that community open, you know, had that's a very embracing community. I love the adult endurance multi-sport, you know, athletic community. So they gave me I learned a lot working with triathletes and marathoners and half marathoners and 5Kers. Like, man, it's just there's such brilliant people, and I learned a lot. But I practiced a lot of those concepts, even though I knew originally what I wanted to do was be working with student athletes. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, basically, you know, anyone from say, you know, 7 up through 25, which is the collegiate population, and so, and everything in between. And so, but at the time, I had to do what I need to do to just get started. And so, but yeah, like once you get to know me, like I'm just a genuine guy. I'm going to be authentic. What you see is what you get. I'm hyper
Mm-hmm.
passionate about, you know, kinetics. And I mean, that's pretty much all I know, right? So if you're looking for anything outside of that, I'm not your guy, right? But I will get you plugged in to the person you need to get plugged in with, right?
Oh yeah.
But you know, I mean, so you can go see ambrose.com and is to answer your question, and you can find out all the ways to get connected with me.
Awesome. Well, everybody, make sure you jump on that right now. Go follow him on Instagram and where else you at? You on Twitter? You on Facebook?
On Yep, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Yeah.
Follow him right now, y'all. Don't waste any time. And yeah, check back with us soon for the next episode. And I've got a lot lined up. So thank y'all for taking the time. Ambrose, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's about it.
Hey, you know, man, DOC, I appreciate you, man. I love you, man, and I'm really excited to see everything that you do with your business. Athlete Factors is definitely just gonna be that next level. I mean, you definitely, you know, the next wave coming up to really bring athletes where they need to be. So I'm excited to see what all you do, man. So yeah,
Hey,
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
hey, I appreciate it. All right, y'all. Have a good one.